So for the last discussion we're going to be doing in this series, I want to bring up something that I've really started to think about quite a bit more within the last year or so. Especially now that I'm starting to play board games in online implementations more and more often.
Because you kind of have to.
Yep, exactly. For anyone in the distant future watching this, this was recorded 2021 May.
You're fine now. You can go ahead. I'm still stuck at home.
Soon enough.
Ooh, we'll see.
But I've really started to notice board games, specifically like the physical board game medium, and like big differences between board games and just general, I guess you could say video games or games in general.
Yep.
And one thing I will definitely say right away is there's some really unique challenges that board games need to face that normal games don't. And I have it just written down, like things that are good game design are not necessarily good board game design. There are like really specific elements and constraints in board games. I'll talk about at least a couple that are off the top of my head right now. One, a board game has to fit on a table. Let's just say that realistically, right? When you play some video game, especially those information overload, you can have like things popping up, like dashboards, lots of information,
right?
That pops up. Someone else in the game like scores some point, it'll just like flash a notification for you. You can't do that in a board game, or at least they haven't innovated to that point yet.
It's harder, yeah.
So any sort of signaling and information has to come like from the game itself as you interact with it. And one thing that I really want to talk about at some point during this discussion is like global boards versus player boards, for example, as one like instance where I see this. Sometimes there's this really big game and someone's got like a unique player board, things that only affect their own state. And they're like all the way on the other side of the table. And it's like, how am I going to see? Like, they're just extra challenges to looking at that. And especially if this is some game where like your intent is like a little more important. If I'm just like, oh, Victor, how much wood do you have? Like from across the table?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It promotes interaction, promotes discussion. Make sure we're talking to each other.
I agree. That's good. And I think all games should emphasize this type of interaction. But
yeah, that's the main interaction in Euros, just asking each other how many resources you have.
If I want to be sneaky, oh my God, that's so funny. If I want to be sneaky, things like this make it harder. Whereas let's say in a video game where you have some ability to get that info without craning your neck, that's doable. So that's one thing I've thought about.
Okay.
Second one, and I think it's an often overlooked aspect of board games, is that rule enforcement comes from the players itself. There's no like software that ensures that like your score was added correctly or that some illegal move wasn't done. And I think this is a big one too. Like thinking about it even more, some groups, it's almost inevitable that the rule book's going to come out. People are going to start flipping. And like, I see this in general as a bit of a negative pattern when it comes up. When you have these very like, I guess, yeah, the rules are just a little complicated and like enforcement isn't as obvious as it should be.
Right. Like versus a video game where you just literally can't do things.
Exactly. You're just constricted.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's a high level, like as players type of goal here, but it's definitely something I've noticed, I will say.
Okay.
And it has caused me to think more highly and more negatively of like different types of patterns that I see in games.
Different games specifically?
Different types
okay.
of games.
You want to start with the negative?
Sure. So this is a take I've had in the past, and it, of course, is like up to my taste a little bit. I really dislike deck building games. And this is going to upset some people because there are some very popular deck building games out there.
Myself included.
But I just find the tedious action of like drawing cards, shuffling your deck. It's just, this could be automated by a computer and you would basically not lose any. It's part of the experience, in my opinion.
Fair. I mean, I think it's there's something nice about physically shuffling, drawing, touching those cards. It makes you feel like you crafted it a little more, I think.
Perhaps
I don't know. I don't find the shuffling aspect of things to be that tedious, in my opinion. I think you have plenty of time. Usually it's not like a simultaneous game. There's like turns that you're waiting for and gives you something, you know. If you don't like downtime, you can just shuffle more.
I'm so not into this. I don't know. So let's bring a real example in. A classic, Dominion. Assuming you're playing some normal strategy, how many times on average would you say you have to shuffle your deck in Dominion?
Ooh, I don't want to get. I'm pretty sure this is like a well-known thing.
Oh,
like
I actually have. No, I
don't know what
really
it is, but I don't think it's that much. I think it's like 3 or I don't know, probably like 4 or 5. I don't know. I could be completely off that.
I think it's somewhat high. And then there are certain strategies that involve you like drawing your whole deck every turn if you're cycling.
Yeah, that's fine. Then it doesn't even matter if you shuffle it properly.
It's just annoying. So
I think you're making this out to be more of a thing.
No. I consider this an anti-pattern, a negative design outcome of deck building games. You have all this tedious mechanical, and it just adds like so little to the enjoyment of the game.
I mean, I agree. It doesn't really bring me that much joy, and it probably is better if I didn't have to shuffle it. But
yeah,
I don't think it takes away any. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm just mindlessly like shuffling my cards. I'm not thinking that hard or anything. It's not like my wrists aren't getting sore. I think I'm okay. I think
the issue for me, and this might be a little extreme, I'll admit, is that humans don't truly shuffle cards properly. Like, you're never going to get a true random shuffle if you're doing it by hand. And for any computer science nerds out there, yes, I know you can't do true random shuffles in computers too. Don't at me. But it's definitely not going to have the problem of like these two cards were like purchased at the same time and they like combo together super well. And unless I'm really like good at shuffling, they're gonna most likely end up together.
Then you're just straight up cheating, man.
No. This isn't like I'm looking and making sure. This is not that at all.
I mean, are there ways to shuffle more properly or thoroughly, I guess?
Oh man, this is a total aside. Because this gets brought up on Reddit every now and then. But like people say like, if you ever play Dominion with me, don't bridge shuffle my cards. Like I'll kick you out.
That's not what I mean. I just meant like the pile shuffles or whatever, you know.
Oh, imagine like that's see, this is what I'm talking about. Now you're turning shuffling into this like lame like.
Okay, well, how much brain power does it actually take to do that? Come on.
I'm not talking about brain power. I'm just talking about like it's a waste of time and it's just not fun.
Okay.
Well, I'm trying to maximize fun.
Fair. I mean, like when you're playing like Termiska and you're waiting between turns, what are you usually doing?
If I'm being honest, staring at the board intently, planning my next move.
Yeah, you can do that in Dominion just while you're shuffling.
You can't really, because it depends on what you draw, but whatever. This is besides the point. Another category of game that I think is getting into this zone as well is these like highly simultaneous games where I guess it's not the like mechanistic issues at this point, but it's more of a rule enforcement thing. I'm going to go straight for a game I know you really like. Seven Wonders. Okay. Too much is going on at once, and I'm going to throw it out there. It's easy to cheat in Seven Wonders if you really wanted to.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm going to... I can't actually afford this card. Let me just put it down. what are the odds someone's gonna really know?
Well, what are the odds I want to play with you again? If you do that?
It doesn't
Pretty
matter.
low.
Doesn't matter if you don't get caught. Let's just say that.
Well, okay. I know if you're consistently beating me, then something's up. I mean, I think that's the thing, right? Like, if I don't know, I'm not really here to win that much. I mean, I'm not like trying that hard.
I agree. I agree. This is a bit of a broken. Like, if you play with someone who's that bad, they're cheating to win. I agree. You know, certain types of games might make it easier, but you're gonna have a bad experience regardless. I'm with you there.
Fair. I think you're maybe more inferring like the accidental cheating.
So yeah. Let's talk about accidental cheating too. I think this happens very often in Seven Wonders as well, because it's very chaotic. Maybe you tell yourself, "Oh yeah, I'm supposed to play this card. I'm gonna buy like 2 from this guy to my left. Got to give him 2 coins." And maybe for whatever reason your phone buzzes at that moment, or someone asks you a question, and you just forget to give the coins.
The other guy just takes
it. How are they gonna know? They're not gonna know.
They know. I honestly think with Seven Wonders, from my experience, when you're playing with more experienced players, then like they know when they need to pay or what cards.
As in, like, does that happen because you look at your player to the left and player to the right and you see what they bought, and it's up to you to check whether they can afford it?
Well, I think you're just like you're probably like you're wanting a specific card in your hand, right? So you're looking at that card and looking at the resources it takes, and then whether or not you have that, and if you don't, then who you have to pay, right? I think that's a pretty easy thing to do. It's more so the accidental cheaters where they're like inexperienced at the game, and so they didn't realize they needed to like do this or pay someone this or whatever. But I feel like in those cases, those people are even more kind of mindful of what resources they need because they are new, and like
I suppose so.
They're like really like making sure that this is something that they can do.
I'll just put it out this way. Recently, I played Seven Wonders on Board Game Arena, and can't believe I'm saying this. My opinion of the game is actually favorable during that experience.
I thought you were going to say, I can't believe it got even lower.
Like, I can actually tell what cards everyone is playing. I can actually see what cards I can afford right away.
Yeah.
It shows up on Board Game Arena, and the payment is done automatically for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice. I definitely do like Seven Wonders on Board Game Arena, but I still would never turn down playing a game in person either. I think it's still
I agree. It's not going to be the difference between me.
Like, I think you'll just turn down any experience of Seven Wonders. Probably, but that's fine.
You're revealing too much about me here.
I think just like any kind of resource heavy game, like even like Power Grid, if you're playing online, I don't think there's a good implementation online, but if there was, I feel like it would make things a lot easier in that game.
So I agree with you there. Every game is going to have some level of like unfun mental upkeep required.
Yeah.
And maybe this is the way we should be saying it. One of those versions of unfun mental upkeep is making sure the rules are being followed. Right?
Yeah.
Like, Power Grid is one example that we've mentioned in the past. One of the unfun things is you have to add a crazy number of numbers. Not crazy. You have to add a lot of numbers every single time you take a turn.
Right.
And it's just like all this mental math that could be super optimized for you. And I think we both agreed. You can say it's part of the game, but it's really not. Like, you don't want to win because someone like added wrong. Like, that's just not fun. Right?
Yeah. But I mean, you can kind of make an argument that a lot of games are like this though. And basically any games with like resources, I feel that you need to be paying. If there is some mechanism where online it tells you like, oh, this move will give you this and you'll end up like this in this game state or whatever, and it kind of outlines those options for you, I feel like that would just make things a lot easier. That doesn't necessarily mean the game in person is that tedious or
I agree,
awful or anything, but
I think the size of that gap is the big thing for me. Some interesting like points you made there. I'll throw this out there since you made me think about it. Are there any board games that like don't? Okay, I'm just saying this is a false statement in my opinion.
Okay.
Every board game would be better online. I don't agree with that statement, but you
Right.
could say that, right? Because some of the pointless mental upkeep has been removed.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something like as board game players and hopeful designers, is that something that like you just have to accept? Like this is an inferior thing, like we just have to deal with it?
I don't. I wouldn't say so. I mean, like we've talked about before, I feel like board games should be kind of more of a social experience,
Agreed.
and a lot of it is just that experience of being together and playing this game together, which a lot of which is lost when you're playing online. So I think,
totally agree too.
I mean, if board games are kind of just a way to facilitate that, then I feel like the online experience is probably not as good. But if you are playing board games to be a little more like into the weeds of the mechanisms, then I guess you can maybe make that argument.
Like, here's something I would think maybe. Is rule enforcement ever fun?
No.
Like, is it ever something that you want to be doing? Maybe they're just games I don't really know about where this comes together so naturally, but
it's fun when it benefits me. No, I don't like. I never like doing it because I always feel like I'm taking away something from a player.
I agree.
If it's accidental that they like messed up or something.
Yes. So we mentioned this in the past, and I think it's at least worth bringing up. Another game that I don't hate as much, but it definitely fails a little bit at this with the forced rule enforcement is any trick-taking game. Wizard, even The Crew.
Yeah.
For example, right? It has, when you're playing online, it's super obvious. It'll tell you you're not allowed to play this card when you're trying to like play off suit. But it happens to me very frequently in person. You know, someone plays a trump out of color, and especially if they're new, and it's like seems improbable that they could do it so early, I'll just say out loud, "Oh, you don't have any of this suit left," and most of the time, it involves an embarrassed fold the card back, you know, and obviously I care about the integrity of the game, but I don't want to be doing this. It's like not a good experience either.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then it does help, like you said, that online it just automatically happens and there doesn't need to be that awkward conversation or interaction. But I feel like that one's, I mean, I think it has to happen. There has to be some kind of rules lawyer there. I guess usually the person teaching the game or the more experienced players that needs to kind of keep everyone in line, I suppose. And I think also with the first games or first plays of games with people, that's kind of expected that's going to happen. So I don't feel as bad there. But yeah, and I mean, I don't know, if you are more experienced players, then I don't think saying that would be as uncomfortable.
I agree. So I think you could joke it's part of the social experience as well.
Gotta call people out.
It's a reason to talk.
Yeah.
Here's a fun question that I'm just curious if this is something I observed specifically or it happens to you too. But when you're playing like some of these, especially more complex games, how often do you have to like either reference the rulebook mid-game or even worse, Google Board Game Geek some rule?
Oh, every time.
Okay.
It happens very well. Okay. Caveat is that I have a lot of games, as you can tell. So a lot of times I don't repeat games, or it's very, very long period of time between repeats of games.
Totally fine. Like,
it is often my like second or third time playing a game. So there's going to be edge cases that I just don't know, especially with more complex games.
So this is.
But yeah,
I feel like never enjoy doing this either. I'll just like throw that out there. Like, it's just a waste of time. You're like checking this thread. Oh yeah. Like someone said this too. It's.
Yeah, usually what we do is just house rule and agree on whatever the house rule is and just play that way moving forward. But yeah, I've been on a lot of Board Game Geek threads about rules and stuff.
I mean, me too. I'm not gonna pretend like even for games that I play really often, sometimes, especially if a game has cards, that's a big one.
Oh yeah, like that interact with each other.
That interact. There's just too many possibilities, especially things you've never seen before. So, but I never enjoy this, and maybe it's the nature of some groups I've been in the past. But I think every group has this value between like properness and like inconvenience, and they like find that house rule, for example.
I mean, luckily, a lot of my games, like no one else knows the rules. It's just me.
That's hilarious.
But I can just like make up whatever I want.
Actually, this is
not cheating or anything, but
a very fun and random side story. Is there are at least a couple instances I can think of where I interpreted a rule wrong and played it wrong for like many years until I met someone who knew the rules and just told me that's not how it works. And I've done this to people too, actually, now that I can think about it, where they say it's this and I'm like, no, it's not. And they have to look at the rulebook and they're like, holy crap, I've been playing this game wrong for like 5 years.
There's always that thread on our.
I was gonna say every now and then there's a thread on Reddit too.
Comes up, and there's that like infamous Hanabi story. I don't know if
I know it, but I'd like to hear it.
It's basically like, I think someone just posted a I don't know what they posted a question about Hanabi. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like phrased in such a way that implied that they were playing it competitively this whole time.
Like they didn't know it was a co-op game.
Yeah, no.
That's hilarious.
I don't remember exactly what the question is, but it's like infamous now.
That's so funny.
It might be an interesting experience. Who knows?
I think it's doubly interesting when sometimes this happens and you like prefer the fake rule you made up. Like you think the game is better with it.
Yeah, that happens. That happens in like the classic games like Monopoly and Uno or whatever.
That's true, yeah.
Like
house
all
rules become lower. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I don't know.
Maybe that's the evolution that needs to happen, right? Like
if it's not a good rule, just like evolve it out.
Like this is not a total joke here. Like this is something that board games could lean into more. Maybe not. But like,
yeah, I mean,
this would never happen in a video game, for example, right? Because
no. Well, I think for video games, what I was thinking is like you can patch things pretty easily, right? Whereas in board games, it's kind of not accepted. I mean, I don't know if you know the game Tapestry.
I don't know.
It's a Stonemaier game, so it's like it gets a lot of coverage, I guess.
But they're accepted patches, you're saying?
Well, that was the thing. So they released the game and they found like some factions were broken or needed some tuning.
Oh yeah, this happens in a lot of games too. Yeah.
So then they released like patch notes basically that handicap some factions or give some factions more starting things. And people are like pretty upset because I guess the balance was like really off.
Like before or after the patch?
Before.
Well, why would people be upset? Isn't that good?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's just like in board games, it's not really accepted to patch things. It's supposed to be like a complete balanced product.
I think that's a fair point.
Whereas like in video games, it happens all the time, right?
Yeah, and it's more accepted. I totally agree. That's a very interesting point. Especially these games that get played competitively, like people have made like house rule style patches to like Puerto Rico, Agricola, for example. Things that like just remove this card, like it's clearly broken. Like
yeah,
those are small, more subtle changes.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, yeah, just to bring that up.
Yeah, and I think part of it's probably just because some patches like aren't possible sometimes if things are like printed on cards. I mean, you could like house rule and just be like you get 3 instead of 4 or whatever, but it doesn't feel as good, I guess, to patch those kinds of things.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I want to mention when it comes to rule enforcement. I guess I'm a little less negative about it overall. There's some fun quirks that we've just mentioned. It's probably still a net negative when you have to do it. You have to be Googling things. It's just like extra work the players might not want to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the type of game too. I think if it is like a more complex game where it's very heavily competitive, then I think it matters more that people follow the rules. Whereas if it's kind of like a more luck based whatever like game, then I don't know. I don't think it matters as much.
Yeah.
Either way, though, it is a little uncomfortable to be doing that.
Yeah. I just think, it's an interesting quirk in board games that I don't think people talk about explicitly as much as they could.
Yeah, that's why you just play co-op games, so you can learn the rules together, like we talked about.
Yeah. Okay. Second one I really want to talk about, because this one bugs me more, is I'm calling it signaling, but I'm going to say some sort of like communication.
Okay.
As a player sitting at the table while the game is going on, do you know what other people are doing? Can you like easily infer some public state about the game? And I had the kind of broken-ish example before of like craning your neck is unfun. Maybe it's okay. But a lot of times, like, signaling is kind of difficult in board games. One pattern that I think of is like player boards, global boards. I think cards in hand too is kind of one as well. Like, especially if there's Bonanza, let's say, is a decent example. It involves some like you have to follow some rules of how your hand works, and like no one is really gonna know.
Yeah, that's fair.
If you cheat,
like
for
cards
example,
in hand is like a weird one. I feel like it's one where people are like more comfortable with hiding or cheating for whatever reason.
Exactly.
I don't know why, but no, I get what you're saying. So yeah, I think some online implementations, like on Board Game Arena, I think they do a pretty good job of displaying that information for everyone to see. It's usually just like on the sidebar or something.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that like you don't notice until you have it. Like, yeah, Seven Wonders, but there are other games too. Like, man, having this online like UI makes it maybe too easy, but like makes it easy and a little more enjoyable. You can focus on the things that you care about. A little better.
Yeah, no,
although I'm going to go back to rule enforcement just a second when I talk about online implementations. We recently played a game online where it was like too automated, if you know what I mean. We were playing some like brass implementation where it just did everything for you.
Oh, I mean, that was okay, I think.
Sometimes this happens in Board Game Arena too, which I dislike. Where like you click and some move happens and like a bunch of things on the board change so quickly.
Okay.
And everyone's like, wait, and they're like, you can audibly hear the mouse the mouse wheel scrolling as they like try to figure out what happened. I guess it is a bit of a it's part of signaling, actually. I'm gonna say that. When rule enforcement is too automated.
Right. It makes it hard to learn the game, I think.
Exactly.
But I mean, I guess if you are more experienced, then that stuff doesn't really matter as much. I mean, most of it is, I think most of it, that stuff should be like housekeeping things that players don't really influence. It's good for them to know what's happening, but like it's not something that you can change, I guess, a lot of the times.
I don't know that solution here just yet, but I do agree there's some ideal balance somewhere there.
I mean, I think on Board Game Arena, you can just make the animation slower. If you really want to.
Maybe, because sometimes it's a little better like that. But I guess to be a little more organized, I have at least thought this. Bad signaling is bad for at least 3 reasons I can think of, and maybe more as we keep talking. We've already touched on at least 2 of these. 1, it enables cheating. I agree, it's a bit of a broken argument, but accidental cheating is totally a thing, and it enables that as well. 2, it hurts learning, which we've already said. When you're playing some game and someone is like doing all these moves just on their player board and you can't even tell what's going on, even if they're playing the game totally properly, no one cheated at all, it's a little less fun, right? Maybe you want to understand what's so like brilliant about that strategy if they happen to win.
Right, yeah.
And that's totally lost on you. And third, and related to number 2, I would say, is it just feels disconnected. This is probably the thing I dislike the most about Seven Wonders. Someone just does something on the other end of the board, and I really
Bring it back to someone.
don't know what's happening. I don't even like need to know their name or what the heck they're doing.
Oh man,
It's like I'm not even playing with them.
you just need a smaller table or something. Like, I mean, I do agree with Seven Wonders. I was gonna say a lot of the times, a not a solution, but a way that kind of mitigates the effect of this is that there is some kind of central board that you're also interacting with. Like for Terra Mystica, for example, when you're taking things, and I could be wrong about this, but when you're taking things off your board, you're generally placing them on to the main board.
Yep.
Right. So you can kind of deduce what they've done by looking at the main board.
There are some, like, you can upgrade some traits that are only on their board, but it's not that common. I totally agree.
Yeah. And well, Seven Wonders doesn't really have that, so I can't argue for that. But yeah, so I think that's kind of one way to do it. The other way is just, I think, kind of vocalize your moves. And we talked about this a bit.
Totally.
It's not something I usually do, but when we were playing online, that game Brass.
Yeah.
And the first few tunes were like, we should just talk our moves out loud because we didn't know what we were doing.
Exactly. I agree.
That was very helpful. And I tried doing that throughout the game, but I slowly stopped. But I feel like it's something that should be done more often in person, as a way to teach and just make sure everyone's on the same page and not cheating accidentally or what have you. And like you said, it does make the experience a little more social. And you can ask questions like, why are you doing that, or what's going on there, things like that. Sometimes I, more often than not, I only do it if I know I'm going to have a really good move.
You just want to flex. You want people to know.
No, not to flex. I mean, maybe a bit, but just because I feel like if I don't say what I'm doing, people are gonna be like, "You're definitely cheating. What's going on here?" Right? Like with like Dominion or something. If I just like keep drawing cards and like playing them, they'll be like, "Wait a minute, hold up."
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. No, it's interesting, right? Everything you just said, I totally agree with all those points in terms of the benefits of vocalizing. Like, yeah, everything you said was totally on point. It's interesting, right? You have this mental model of like, maybe you could even say, maybe I'm assuming too much here, like when you have this epic move, you almost want to vocalize it to like make sure for yourself, it works.
Right.
And so that people like see it and like maybe even learn a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you are playing like I am usually with people that are less experienced, things like that kind of help, I think.
And sometimes you teach yourself even, right? Like maybe everything came together and you're like, whoa, like this really works. And like, say things out loud, you're more likely to remember them. Maybe some study has said that. Like,
do you feel like you actually do that though? Like, do you vocalize your moves usually? Because I typically don't.
It depends on the game, I think. I actually do think I kind of try and keep this pattern up. I do agree it's very central to teaching, but connectedness as well, as you said.
Do you feel like, I mean, I think sometimes the reason why I don't do it is because I feel like people are already a little disconnected. So it just feels like I'm talking to no one. But do you feel like if you do it more often, it would bring more connectedness? Like if you're the only one doing it, for example.
So you can either be saying your moves or you can be like asking someone's move, I suppose, when they do it as well.
Okay, fair.
Which I do a decent amount. Like I'll say, oh, what are you doing? Maybe that comes across as like
I was gonna say
too policing, but
questioning me.
I haven't sensed that so far in my groups.
Okay.
I think this is, just as a side note, I think this is a big thing for somewhat like simultaneous games as well, where, well, it's hard, right? You're not gonna, for example, if you're playing Sidereal Confluence, this like ridiculously chaotic game, you're never gonna vocalize your moves because it's just impossible.
Fair. I mean,
but the game like leans into the chaos at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely more of a unique experience.
But that's a game I kind of struggle with personally. Maybe that's just the type of player I am. I like to understand what's going on, Even if I lose, like I like it because I can understand why I lost.
Right.
It helps me learn the game. And when there's pure chaos, literally every game of Sidereal Confluence I've ever played involves people running around the table, like shouting deals at each other, and
You're not playing Happy Salmon.
it's just chaos. Yeah, Happy Salmon. I mean, even Galaxy Trucker. There's so much in that game that happens silently and can't really be vocalized that I always get stomped when I play Galaxy Trucker. I'll just say that right now because I find it really hard to learn because the signaling is kind of bad.
Okay, so do you feel like real-time games are, I guess they are worse offenders for both signaling and rule enforcement?
I personally do. I mean,
like...
I don't want to harp on real-time games because some of them are pretty fun, and you kind of like that chaos too sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different experience. It's a very divisive thing. But I guess going back to kind of our topic, it's in terms of having it online. Do you think it works well? Because I feel like real-time games online are just like not good, in my opinion.
Like real-time board games.
Board games, yes.
I mean, I don't even know if I've really played that many of them. Just thinking.
I think that we've only played. Maybe it's not the real-time aspect of it that's the issue, but there's a version of Magic Maze on Board Game Arena.
Oh gosh, that sounds a little
awful. I mean, it's not the website's fault. It's just I don't know if it implements well online.
I agree. I mean, there's so much that really you have to do in person for Magic Maze. That this is a topic we can go into a bit more, I guess, once we finish this. But I think it's interesting that you say that because although real-time board games are maybe painful online, almost every video game is real-time.
Yeah.
Right? Like tons of stuff happens that you never see unless you're like watching a replay of the game. And there's tons of subtlety that you don't notice.
Yeah.
But it's totally fine. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the video games are better at the rule enforcement.
Of course, thing. Yeah.
Like that just negates that problem completely. And even the signaling, I feel like games try and give you a lot of information, and then like getting good at the game is just being able to intake that information and process it and still be doing your thing.
It's just interesting that there's like there's a disconnect there for whatever reason. Maybe because we just have this mental model of board games that involves I got to be doing rule enforcement, I got to be doing X. That like when we give that control away, it just like puts us off. Whereas in video games, that's never an option. Like you're always giving the control up.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a bit of a happy design point there, but I guess you're never going to really design. Who knows? Maybe the future is this, but you're never really going to design a board game to be like online primary.
Right.
At least today.
Right.
You would argue it's probably not even a board game at that point.
Yeah. No, fair. There is a deck builder. I don't know if you've heard of Slay the Spire.
No, I don't.
I'm sure
I hate deck builders, so no.
It's a deck builder, but it's completely online. So it's a Steam game.
I see.
Where you're like dungeon crawling through a dungeon and you have a deck and you're slowly building that deck throughout.
So you're saying it could exist as a real board game, like completely?
It would be tough because it's supposed to be a solo game, so you're facing like an opponent. So I think that part would be difficult to model in a board game, but the card play itself can definitely be a board game.
Yeah. See, that I think that's interesting. Maybe there's a movement towards the type of hybrid, but I really don't know much about it. I just think it's an interesting point.
I don't know, fair.
So I guess maybe the last thing we'll talk about, because you brought it up and it really triggered this thought to me.
Trigger you?
Magic Maze topic.
What should I trigger?
No. Good. Not a negative thing.
Okay.
But I think a big element of board games that games should lean into this a little more, in my opinion. The thing that makes Magic Maze quite beautiful is like it's this fun co-op that involves a lot of unspoken communication and like just things that don't happen that involve the board at all, right? off-board stuff.
Mm.
And there's virtually no way to encode this in an online setting properly, I would say. Even if you played like in Zoom and you could see everyone, it's totally not the same. I'm willing to go there and say that.
Okay, that's fair.
And I mean, I think, for example, any negotiation-based game is like super hard to play online because the negotiation, the unspoken information that comes out of it doesn't really translate online very well.
I mean, yeah, at that point, I don't know if I agree with you completely. I feel like there are some games. I mean, you've played Diplomacy online, for example, right?
That's so different, though. Like, it
So
wasn't
you're still
fully
negotiating, right?
online. I'll say that when I
Okay,
played, at
fair.
least. Like, we met in person to discuss strategy, like, while we were playing.
Right. But like, could you have substituted those meetings with just Zoom calls? You feel like would that be too much of a change?
I don't think it would work. I'll say this actually as a clear example. When we played another game of Diplomacy with the same group, some people were so jaded by getting wrecked and betrayed that they like refused to play again.
Okay, yeah.
So we actually had to invite one of the players' friends who didn't even like live in the city to play with us. So he did everything online, and all of his communication was online. And you know what the outcome was? No one wanted to work with them because they were just like, I can't trust this guy pre-2020. I can't trust some guy I only see behind the screen. I can't tell if he's lying to me. It's too hard. Like,
oh my god.
People had said that to me, and I agreed. I mean, I never even considered working with a guy just because we weren't close enough to each other.
Oh, okay,
But I had heard that as well from other players.
I think you just didn't like this guy.
No, we never even met him.
And well, I think that's part of it. Just like some random stranger, right? Like if some stranger joined your game, do you think you would want to work with them?
In real life, maybe. Honestly, if it was real life, I hope to have this experience one day, playing Diplomacy with people I've never met before. Maybe it'll be painful and I'll run home crying, but
He's so awkward. I don't know.
It's just a whole other element. I'll say personally, my sense is that it wasn't the stranger element that was the big problem. It was just, I have the option between allying with someone who's literally sitting here.
Yeah, I mean, that's
or
fair.
Someone who I only get to Zoom call. And it's just like, I want to be able to tell if someone's lying to me, and like trust them, and this is only going to happen in person.
I mean, like, I guess the big counter argument to that is games like Among Us, right? Where it's all online.
I ain't about
a lot of it
games.
is just like trying to figure out who's lying, negotiate a bit, I guess, things like that. I mean, I feel like it's a successful enough game that you can say it works, right?
You already know I hate
I know
deception games.
I know, but it's part of it, right? Like the lying and the negotiation is part of it. So I think it can be done online.
I mean,
it probably is just like it's better in person. So if you have that option, you definitely would take it. But like, for example, even your Diplomacy game, if it was purely online, I think it'd still be an okay game.
See, the key thing is you're saying it's okay, and that's the thing, right? It's worse.
Yeah,
and I agree with you. It's possible, but it's a second option for me.
Fair.
This is going to show my like bias though, but I think board games especially shine because, assuming they are designed the way they are today, you're forced to be sitting in the same room as these people, and things like negotiation, banter, being more prevalent in the game cause it to be a better board game, in my opinion. Right? An interesting side example I'll give, although people would probably call this a broken pattern, is like Codenames. Let's keep it real simple.
Okay.
When you play Codenames in person, we are not pure saints. There's a little bit of cheating. Let's be honest.
Okay.
You know, you start talking about selecting some clue and the clue giver like smirks
Oh,
Stuff like that.
you need a
It
better poker
happens.
face. Come on,
It happens. It happens to me. I'm not gonna lie.
just
It
look at your
happens.
phone. Jeez.
No, but I think this is like fun. Let me just say this. Imagine playing code names like that versus you're behind a screen and you just type your clue and like you're not even allowed to like see anything.
I mean, early on when I played a few Zoom games with code names. They were fine. I feel like the experience was pretty much the same. To me, I don't know. I don't try too hard to like egg on the clue giver or whatever, to try and get those clues from them. Definitely was a part of it, but
that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm obviously not a purist, as you can tell, because I have this take, but it's part of the game. It makes it more fun.
It gives you that opportunity.
Let's be honest, right? And I suppose everyone has this balance between connectedness, fun, versus like properness, right? Because really, when we talk about online games being better with signaling and rule enforcement, we're talking about like how proper the mechanics experience is.
Yeah.
And I think as players and designers, I think understanding that trade-off is pretty interesting. That might be like how I would close this topic out.
Okay, well, that's fair. I think that's fair.
But
I mean, the other thing is you could just, as a board game designer, you can just throw a bunch of minis in there, and then your board game will not be the same online. You don't have to worry about this.
Trying to get us canceled.
What do you mean?
Trying to get us canceled by our board games.
Minis are great.
Oh my gosh!
And basically just paying for plastic.
We're not opening this topic. That's a different, totally different thing.
Oh, you get a game and toys. What's wrong with that?
Okay, we're done here.